Funny to think they were on our side in the war.
Oh dear.
The Rorskis, with old Joe Stalin.
Yes, he was a nice chap. I liked him, like an uncle he was. I liked his mustache and his pipe.
Roosevelt's nice too. The three of them, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin, all good blokes. With old Hitler, Goring, and Musso, and all that mob on the other side. You somehow knew where you were then. I don't even know who the people are these days.
I expect it's all done by committees, dear.
Yes, and meetings. I expect they have loads and loads of meetings and thus arrive at decisions. Commuters, too. They all use commuters these days. It's got very impersonal. Churchill with cigar. Old Stalin with his mustache. You knew where you stood.
Oh, do you think they'll invade?
Oh, won't need to. It'll all be done by missiles. Long range. Then they'll instill commuters to take charge of us. This is just how we talk now.
Yeah,
Just so y'all know.
yeah. We've settled on some new accents for. This is actually the big announcement of the year. We're kind of delayed, we had to workshop it a bit,
Yeah, last year
but
you transed your gender. This year you transed your accent.
that's correct. It's transatlantic.
It's a transatlantic
Congrats.
accent. Yeah,
Congrats on your coming out.
Socialist Shelf. Be good, goods, and organize yourself. Socialist Shelf. Be good, goods, and organize yourself.
You're now listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome once again to the Socialist Shelf as February draws to a close. The weather gets a little bit warmer, and then cooler, and then warmer again. It's
it's
Georgia,
not going to be
y'all.
February when this comes out, almost for sure. But
Yeah, yeah, and it's not. It's
and
I
you'll
mean, who
deal with
knows?
it because that's just how it goes. I'm
Who
sorry.
knows what the weather's going to be like? TBH.
Yeah.
I'm of course Lenore Jacob. Welcome back.
What's up? What's up?
And there's a third person today. We have another guest, a repeat guest, in fact. Tay, welcome back.
Hi, it is I again. Thank you for having me back on here again. I'm really looking forward to doing this all over again. I am now under a new name though, no longer going by Wispy Witch though.
What
That's
what are we
what's
going
up.
by now?
Going by Foxy Macchiato now.
Foxy Macchiato.
Fantastic.
Okay. So we have
Haven't
had
even
an
drank coffee
alias.
and yet.
So Tay, we appreciate you coming back. Of course, last time we talked about something really, really serious, which is the Sonic Archie comics. So you were like, let's do something a little lighter. Let's talk about fucking nuclear annihilation.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your sweet
Yeah.
grandparents slowly dying of radiation poisoning.
Oh Lord, what a really joyous subject to talk about considering the times.
Okay, this was your this piece was the When the Wind Blows is something that you were interested in. I'm curious because this is not something I'd read. I'm familiar with Raymond Briggs, and we'll get into the author for a second. But tell me what drew you to this story here, and why are we talking about this today? Because this is, I'd say, the second graphic novel we've discussed, and this is the third. I mean, if you count the Sonic Archie comics, they aren't really graphic novels, but it's the visual
Yeah.
medium. The third time we've discussed a sort of a visual medium, visual novel, what have you. So why are we doing this today? Tell us about it.
Well, a couple of years back, I came across this YouTuber called Steve Reviews, and he did reviews on certain animated media that it was portrayed in a more darker sense, like Barefoot Again. He covered The Ringing Bell, Paddock, and one of those reviews was When the Wind Blows. And When the Wind Blows is a story about this elderly couple who's getting ready for nuclear annihilation, pretty much. They're getting prepped for when the war happens, but they're putting too much trust into the government, even though pretty much it leads to not really good terms.
Yeah.
And I have always been interested in the story because I like how it was animated and the process of the way they made it. But I couldn't really find the movie until very recently when someone posted the movie online and I was able to watch it for the first time. And now I've come to appreciate the film a lot more, and especially with what has been coming out now recently and tensions with other countries, it has especially grabbed my attention, and I feel like it hits a lot closer to home.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And the
Yep.
film is like a direct, and we'll talk about it, but like a direct adaptation of the graphic novel. Looks very similar, and was, Raymond Briggs was even involved in it. So there's that one to one,
Hmm.
that jump right there to make it shelf worthy, to be sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the author in a second, but Lenore, did you have any history with this or with Raymond Briggs in general?
Oh, I was aware of it, but I didn't have the fortitude to really plunge into it, you know. This what's the Ghibli one? Grave of the Fireflies. Like I'm aware of a lot of like nuclear apocalypse media, but I find it viscerally terrifying, so I hadn't really plunged into it until fairly recently. This, of course, my first brush with the graphic novel When the Wind Blows. I read it for the first
What's
time the
I
other.
don't really understand what's scary about it.
I mean, I
I'm kidding.
Hmm.
I kid, of
where to
course.
begin? Where to begin? I've been to the Hiroshima Museum in Japan,
Hmm.
and oh, good Lord, the shit that they have there, like it sticks with you.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Well, I'll talk about this author Raymond Briggs here for a little bit, because it's definitely, part of the overall story. Um, When the Wind Blows, the writer is Raymond Briggs, who was born in 1934. Okay. He is the child of a milkman and a former maid who became a housewife for said milkman. And he lived the Narnia experience. And by that, I mean he was sent out to the countryside because they were bombing the shit out of London. A lot of kids went through that. He sees it as very formative. A lot of like people, reviewers, who were like, "Oh, that was formative for you. Get in line." That happened to every child in London, basically.
Everybody's met a fawn. Come on.
Fucking everyone was the king for the while for like 30 years, then got sent back in time, had to go back to grade school. We've all done it. But he comes back and he goes to Wimbledon School of Art and then the London School of Art. These are his, like, late high school, early college years. His dad is furious. His dad's like, "I've worked so hard to educate you and you're going to fucking art school. How dare you?" I'm making it sound like his dad's like abusive or something. He's not. His dad's just very, very skeptical of it.
He
Uh,
didn't send him to get shock treatment like Bellew's
No,
parents.
we didn't. Not like Tay. I know you probably haven't because it just came out today. But last week's author Quellu literally got sent to like shock therapy treatment for wanting to be a writer. So, yeah, we're not on that level here. Or nor are we on Mishima holding your child up to a
Oh
tree
my God.
from the week before. Um, yeah. In comparison, this guy being like, "No, son, I want you to be a lawyer," and then being like, "Okay, I guess I can't stop you." It does not sound nearly so bad. Uh,
Do you think if somebody was held up to an electric train, like those things would cancel each other out and they'd be normal, or would they just compound?
I think if you did that, they would actually become a lawyer and they would be good at their job.
That's where they're from.
Yeah, that's right. Um, But then he gets drafted into the military in 1953. But he goes into the military and immediately they're like, "Wait a second, you suck at fighting, but you're really good at drawing." So they make him do little sketches for the military as a draftsman, like
Hmm.
sketching like symbols or whatever to like flash on to boats and planes to show them like different meanings from like a long way away and different sketch art. And they keep him there for a few years. Let him go, and then he goes to Slade School of Art and finally gets his art degree. At this point, he's 23 and has spent 2 years in the military and has gone to three different art colleges. So he's had like a quite a bit of experience already at
So
this
he's the
age.
polar opposite of Hitler.
Yeah, basically so. Yeah, he's the reverse Hitler. And he doesn't like war. So also reverse Hitler. In 1958, he writes and makes Peter and Piskey's Cornish folk tales, and starts at the Brighton School of Art as a teacher. This is where he sort of starts his career. And then he afterwards wins a Hamilton Medal for a loving recreation of all 408 Mother Goose stories. He does them like just like one by one. He like arts does like draws and
He like
recreates
arts
all
them.
of them. Yeah, he arts them. He makes
I'm
art.
gonna start using that from now on. I'm going to art this.
He
Let's
arts them.
go.
Yeah, he wins the Hamilton Medal. Lenore, I know I see you. I
I'm
started laughing.
I'm literally biting my fingers, like trying not to bust out a fucking Lin-Manuel Miranda
Well,
verse.
in 1973, he writes his first real breakout classic, which is still like considered big, which is Father Christmas. If you've seen the art, you've probably seen the art. It's about a working class Santa Claus. It's like Santa Claus who's like gotta clock in for the job, uh, type Santa. And then he gets home and the only gift he's been given is a bottle of liquor, and he's not super happy. But then he drinks it, and then he's like, "Ooh, actually, I do like my job," and
Mood.
that's the story. His same year, his wife Jean dies. His wife, who actually had schizophrenia, he cared for many years before she died of leukemia. Um, her dying of leukemia and not understanding she was dying of leukemia because of her schizophrenia, for him was like really formative to the later stuff he wrote. In fact, when the wind blows, when some of the characters when their hair starts falling out and they're trying to explain it and stuff, he pulls directly from that
Mm.
experience with his wife. His parents die around this exact same time, and his parents are who the characters are based on in When the Wind Blows. So this period in 1973 is like really emotional for him because he's seeing success and he's like losing people close to him.
Half the terror of this
Mm.
book, like quite apart from the nuclear winter angle, is being trapped somewhere and having doom creep up on you and not comprehending it, right?
Yep.
I was literally just talking about this with a coworker the other day. Like we were talking about like high COVID, right? And how like various places managed it. Like she has family who worked in like the nursing home field, right? And if you had dementia and you were like made to isolate, locked up in your room, you don't know why it's happening. You
Yeah.
can't know. Like all you
Exactly.
know is that somebody's putting you somewhere. And
You just wait it out.
Yeah.
yeah.
Fucking
That's
sucks.
terrifying.
Mm.
So he actually then a little later writes in 1978 The Snowman. And this is his most famous work, and it's not even close. Y'all have definitely seen art from The Snowman. It is a completely
Mhm.
wordless story about a boy and a snowman who play all night, and then in the morning the boy wakes up and the snowman has melted, and that's the whole thing. And
Mhm.
he says he doesn't see it as a sad story. He sees it as just very much like this is life. Like this is beautiful. You had this really beautiful night with this snowman and he's like, is it about death? Sort of. Is it about like the dreams of childhood? Sort of. People love this shit. It gets made into a Channel 4 movie. David Bowie, like as part of making the music and does the intro for it. And it plays every single year on Christmas Eve on Channel 4. And
Mm.
in England, it's a breakout classic. This is far and away his most successful piece of work.
Bowie did the When the Wind Blows movie
He
too.
does, but Bowie comes back for the wind blows.
Yeah, he did. It's one of my favorite songs.
He does.
Mm.
In 1980, he writes Gentleman Jim. And this is the first feature of Jim and Hilda, the characters that will appear in When the Wind Blows.
Wait, what?
Yes. It's not, it's, he at this point did not intend to write When the Wind Blows. He did not write these characters to kill them. But Jim is in this story is a janitor who's thinking about other lives he could have lived and imagining different lives and is just kind of a goofy little guy. And this is a popular book, but it's not like super popular. It's just like, oh, these are these like cute little old people characters you made that are like fun and like they like to imagine other lives they could have lived. And Jim is a creative, but like ultimately kind of silly, whatever guy. And then in 4 years later, he's like, what if I killed them?
Oh
What
my
if I
Yeah,
gosh.
that
made
makes
them die the
sense.
worst death possible? What'd you say,
That
Tay?
makes sense for a lot. That makes sense for a lot of the scenes in the movie when he's talking about how like all the stuff he could be doing to help out with the war and like all these different scenarios. That makes plenty of sense now. Why those are
Yeah,
included.
in Gentleman Jim, Jim is spending time like walking around thinking like he was like, if I was an American, I could have been a bank robber. I would have been an awesome bank robber. But like
Oh
not in a
hell
violent
yeah.
way. He's like imagining like he imagines the United States as like the Lone Ranger. Like he thinks that's just what the United States is. And he's just like, I would have been so good as one of the bad guys in the Lone Ranger. Like it's a very charming little
Oh, bless his
thing.
heart.
Yeah.
That's also like not far off from like the stereotypes and assumptions of the day. Like when my mother went to school partly in Italian Switzerland, and she would get down into Italy all the time. And people would ask her, "Oh, you're from Texas. Did you ride a horse to school?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, we saw that with Dracula, right? Bram
Oh goodness.
Stoker in Dracula has an American character whose personality trait is every time he sees an animal, he shoots it, which like
Yes.
saves their lives because he's just like a bat. I must kill it. And they're like, "Thank you, Mr. American, sir. That turned out to be a Dracula." Whatever. Love that book. Go back and listen to the episode. 1982. When the Wind Blows. Apologies.
Where?
When the Wind Blows. So he's watching a bit of a documentary, not a documentary, but like an informational video, which the British government was putting out a ton of these at this time, like what to do in a nuclear situation, right? Because for the political situation, right, you have in the 60s, of course, just like, oh my God, we're all gonna fucking die of nuclear apocalypse. And then 70s, okay, it's hot, but it's not that hot. And for a second, it seems whatever. And then the 80s, like you get Margaret Thatcher, you get Reagan. It's like, oh my God, like this is it. Like we're reaching the apocalypse. Like it's gonna happen. Like we're all going to die. And like the powers that be were very like kind of content. Like at the time they were figuring out how many people can survive a nuclear like how like we have evidence from the time that the Reagan administration, like Thatcher and these people were like sitting down saying, okay, let's be real, how many cities would we have to sacrifice to completely obliterate the Soviet Union? Like they were having these conversations. We'll talk about Watchmen at some point, but it's directly like based on this period as well. Um, I say Reagan. Reagan wasn't fucking having those conversations. Reagan was like
No,
senile by a second term,
no, Nancy ran the country at that point.
yeah, Nancy Reagan and Bush Senior and whatnot. But Oliver North, those people. But like the Reagan administration, the Thatcher administration, um, but regardless, you have like this period where it's like, yeah, no, this it seems like we're not getting out of the 80s without like the next big one. And of course we like did for a lot of reasons, but um and so this is a story about like the absurdity of like some of these suggestions, which is like if you put up like a mattress, like you're going to be safe from like nuclear fallout. Like which is the actual stuff they were saying, because it's like you got to
Hmm.
give them some suggestion. Like save water. It's like I mean, I guess abstractly, but like no, come on.
Who
Let's be
remembers y'all remember the Iron Giant?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
Yes, I love that
yes.
movie.
Yeah, that bit where they're watching like duck and cover, just get under your desk
Yeah,
and like you'll be fine. Nuclear fallout, what's that?
Yeah,
I grew up on that movie, so of course, like the whole fear of the Cold War and nuclear apocalypse has stuck with me for much longer than I realized.
no doubt. And
Mm.
then 1984, the movie comes out for When the Wind Blows, and it has Roger Waters and David Bowie on the music. Great movie. Very, very true to the original thing. Like pretty much just carries over pretty closely. And then to like round out his life, even though I won't go much more, he wrote a ton more stuff, notably Ethel and Ernest in 1998, which is a graphic novel about his parents and their lives. And the last thing he wrote was in 2019. It was called Time for Lights Out, which was reflections on his wife who died of leukemia, reflections on his parents, and reflections on his own life as he was getting very old. Um, and he had a poem he attached to the front of it and the back of it that says, "Looking round this house, what will they say? The future ghosts? They'll say there must have been some barmy old bloke here, long haired, artsy fartsy type, did pictures for kitty books or some such tripe. You should have seen the stuff he's stuck up in that attic. Snowman this and snowman that. Tons and tons and tons of tat." And anyway, he dies 3 years after this at age 88 in
Oh,
2022 um, of
Wow.
pneumonia, possibly COVID. He's 88. It's hard to say, but he was
mm.
but very very long and successful career. Definitely didn't like die like a bajillionaire or anything, but like he did the artist dream, right, of working consistently as an artist and being paid and respected for the work you did and actually getting like that acknowledgement. So cool guy. Not there's not like a ton on him that I can find of like super detailed stuff, but like that's my general overview of our writer here, and also kind of the era that brings us into this book. Um, any thoughts on that before we hop into what this whole thing's about, even though we've kind of already given that away?
Yeah, I mean he's good at capturing, domesticity. He's good at capturing the I don't mean to be like down on Jim and Hilda, our characters here, but like they're like the median voter, right?
Yeah.
They're navigating their lives as best that they can
Yeah.
when politics isn't their chief concern, if concern it even be.
Yeah. Jim probably thinks it is for him.
Yeah.
Jim thinks he knows his shit, which
Mm.
I love that for him.
But as well, I mean, similarly to Quelio, he does, especially with the snowman, he hits a fable in a way that makes you wonder, wow, why hasn't everybody hit it this way, right?
Yeah.
It just makes sense, right?
Mhm.
These universal experiences that we have.
Tay, as someone who is an artist, a visual artist, I don't know. I mean, I know you probably didn't know much about this guy's life, but just kind of giving that life overview, any thoughts that you have taking away from that, any reflections you have?
I just love the fact how, like, as simple as his art style is, like, it's still able to leave such a big impact and make you, like, ask certain questions. It still keeps you questioning, and I guess in a way has you appreciating life a little bit more. That's at least what I take away from it, from
Mhm.
hearing how you describe the snowman and from having rewatched When the Wind Blows and seeing a little bit of Ethel and Ernest. Like, it does leave you feeling like so many feelings, like happy, sad, even at some points like feeling devastation.
Mhm.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
just I have an appreciation for art that can replicate that feeling.
How
I
would
feel
you
like he
describe, you
captures that
think,
perfectly.
how do you feel like you would describe like his visual style? Because it's not like I wouldn't call it simple, but like there is a simplicity to it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
not like he's doing hyper realism or anything like that.
Yeah, it's still the way he's able to express the characters because like you notice how he draws like his facial expressions like with little dotted black eyes and like simple like smiles. But yeah, he's still able to replicate emotions like still like I guess dramatically in
Hmm. They feel like a lot of the characters and this goes to other stuff as well, like have almost like a stuffed doll look to them. Like
a way.
they have
Yes.
almost like a little like I don't know, like scarecrow doll type like put together in like a very charming kind of rustic way.
So
And
I
Raggedy
don't
Ann
want to
kind of
call it the
aspect.
yes, I've almost called it the Caillou art style, but I like his style a little bit more than Caillou. I hate that
Well,
show.
well,
that little
Caillou's bald because of the nuclear fallout. We know this.
Oh
no,
yeah,
no, no, no.
absolutely.
That little shit is the one who pressed the shiny red button.
Oh God, you are absolutely right, Lenore. Caillou causes
Mom,
the
why can't I
fucking
press the
nuclear
button?
apocalypse.
Nobody guessed it was Canada
Uh,
who would end the world.
I guessed it was him. I guessed it was
oh my
him
God.
immediately.
And nobody listens to you, and we are all living in the world that we created with our hubris.
It's true. It's so true.
Hmm.
Okay, so I mean, we already summarized the general premise of this book. It is a couple old folks who are living together. They're doing their best. James and Hilda. They're retired. James calls Hilda ducks. She likes and they're sweet, kind of fussy. And they're waiting around for the big one to come. And the government's been putting around literature that is just literally the literature. Like he's just pulling directly quotes from the actual literature that existed at the local libraries, and they're just kind of like, yeah, it seems like the end of the world is coming in the next couple days. And like the first half is them basically kind of building up, putting stuff together, getting ready, and the second half is post blast and the deterioration that comes after that.
Yeah, in
Hmm.
many many ways. I like that the story starts on like the title page, right? You have When the Wind Blows, and then you have Jim at the library because you can go to the library and read the papers. And so he's reading the London Times, just catching up on current events. Um, it thrusts you right into it. Like it's a really effective like last gasp of something normal, right? Because they talk about like going out and running errands, and then you never see them do it.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about running errands.
Um, so fun fact about the movie too, because I don't know if how this is replicated in the story. I'm pretty sure that he just hands you everything, but in the movie they filmed like James and Hilda. They of course animated them, but everything else they did was stop motion, and they did
Yeah.
that so that way they could replicate the protect and survive clips showing how to prepare your house for a nuclear bomb. And I think that's a really cool way of how they were able to make the movie. I think that was very creative, and I just can't get over how much I love that little addition they put into that movie.
Hmm.
Yeah, Tay, you're absolutely right. There's a kind of mixed media thing going on. I haven't seen the movie all the way through, but I have I did hop around and see a couple clips from it, like,
Oh,
and the
you will
part.
cry.
Oh yeah, and like the live action bits, like where they're doing like stop motion and whatnot, it makes it all the more
Hmm.
jarring that mixed in with the animation, especially where especially with the teacup that shadows their wedding photo.
Mm.
Hmm. And especially when the bomb like hits their window and like everything shatters. That scene is always like the most intense scene.
Hmm. Set to, although like there is. That is the one part of it where the atmosphere kind of wavers for me, and it's probably just because of my personal like sense of humor. But like when you hear Hilda like hear her voice echoing like, "Oh, the cake will burn," like throughout the like
Hmm.
nuclear explosion, I thought that was a little bit funny, but like it gets very serious very fast.
Hmm.
Oh yeah. It's because like in a way like they're so used to their whole normality. Like to them, they think they're gonna be okay. They think that this is just gonna be a normal like, oh, this is gonna happen, but we'll be able to pick ourselves up like after it's all over and done with. But they're not seeing the bigger picture that their lives are gonna be changed forever and they're most likely not gonna survive.
And it really like in the graphic novel starts out with, James gets home and they're just talking and she's like, "Did you have a nice morning?" And at first James is kind of saying, "Well, my life isn't very eventful." And she's like, "Well, you are retired." And she's like, "But you seem down." And he's like, "Yes, well, been reading the papers in public library all the morning. Must keep abreast of the international situation. The decision made by the powers that be will get us in the end." He's just kind of saying it, and she's like, whatever, it's politics, it's its thing. And then he's it's interesting. They capitalize the powers that be, right?
I noticed
This
that
is
too.
this is something that echoes throughout this. He calls them the powers that be, he calls them the folks at the top, he calls them whatever. You get multiple things. One, you never have any reference to any specific politician that is currently in power, right? You reference the politicians of the past,
Hmm.
but he neither knows who is currently the head of his own country nor who is currently the head of the Soviet Union. So that's the first thing.
I remember at one point they like start praising Stalin and saying how they liked him and looked at him like an uncle, and I'm just like, ah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. They looked at him as an uncle because during the World War II period, you have that, and,
Yes.
and and yeah, we read this at the top. Like during the World War II period, obviously Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union were all allies against Nazi Germany, Italy,
Hmm.
fascist bloc, Japan, etc. Um,
Uncle Joe, yeah.
and it's interesting because they kind of um these people, they definitely like kind of peaked in that period, right? Like they remember, or if not peaked, like their best memories are from like back then, the 40s, the 50s. They were young, they were teenagers or early 20s.
Yeah.
um and so back when they maybe were paying a little more attention, they were like, "Oh, well, they were probably, now that I'm thinking about it, they were probably in their early teens or late whatever, because they probably would have been in the war otherwise." But like, yeah, they're remembering that, but now they can't really remember their own government, but they kind of see them as like they're an authority. They're supposed to help. During the last war, there was some semblance of order. This thing exists. But no, I mean, you're right. It is like funny to hear these people who are so anti-Soviet Union also be like, "Well, yeah, but Stalin was cool." But what's interesting is that's
Yeah.
actually a lot of people who lived through that period exactly what they were like, because the media in the United States and Britain during World War II was, for reasons that make perfect sense, incredibly pro-Stalin, and vice versa. The
Hmm.
Soviet Union was incredibly pro United States and Britain in a lot of its media at the time. But it's interesting to be like, this isn't a type of guy you would see reflected in media. But I guarantee you, like half the old people were probably like this. You know what I mean? Like in the 80s. You know what I mean? Like at least in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, and like it also speaks
Yeah.
to a certain true or not, it also speaks to a certain immediacy, a certain um there was a lower degree of alienation. I mean, it's the period, right, where, somebody like my grandfather could write to his congressman and get his commission like reinstated in the Navy, because he wants to do this during Korea instead of like being a grunt on the ground, right? It's a level of access, it's a level of it's it the alienation that they're experiencing right now hadn't quite set in, at least not in their memory.
Well, it's worth noting too that during World War II, the lived experience for people, is they were participating in a national project,
Right.
right? Even though it's like obvious bullshit. The British Empire talking about we're gonna fight against fascism. We know what the fuck they were doing in other countries,
Oh
but
yeah.
for the people living in London, they were participating in a social project of we're going to grow gardens and we're going to sacrifice and we're going to give up these pleasures and we're going to band together and et cetera, and beat back this invasion to our country. And they experienced it socially. And you have the Prime Minister Churchill, who again, fuck Churchill, but their experience of it was this guy's getting on the radio explaining what's happening, explaining what we need to do, and we are part of a project. And the experience at this point in the 80s is, oh, it's being run by computers, and they call them commuters because they don't even know what they are. They're saying, oh, it's being run by, I don't know, committees. It's being run by the powers that be. They are no longer in this new world war part of the project because the technology has advanced to such an extent that there is no project. There is no project anymore. It is just a handful of people with their fingers on the buttons,
Mm,
which is also very much how we experience. I mean, I would say for us, we have no memory of there ever being a real, genuine national project in any kind of sense. There was
absolutely
there
not.
was echoes of it from some people in early COVID of like, let's band together and take care of each other, but that was shattered pretty fucking quickly. I
Well,
don't.
I mean, you couldn't quarantine at all. Like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I had a fucking job. I couldn't quarantine.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Uh, but Tay, I don't know. Thoughts on that? Because like this dichotomy of like the past and the present for their present is so prevalent throughout this entire thing of like what England,
Mhm.
London, all that is supposed to be.
Um, I guess the best way I could really describe it mm, is the fact that they definitely see like they're so used to what the government has pretty much, raised them upon pretty much
Yeah.
that in a sense they put too much of their trust onto the government and expect things to like just be fine, like at the drop of a hat, like expect, oh, we're gonna be mildly inconvenienced by just a few bombs, but we'll be able to pick ourselves up just fine. No worries about that whatsoever. But they don't see at the end of the day, like there's still a huge danger awaiting them. And that of course, like it feels like they
Like
is
you
that to
just
them they view their government in like in a way where they're wearing rose colored glasses pretty much, but they're not sitting
Yeah.
here asking themselves like but what if this happens, or what if we don't have this item, what if they're not asking the what ifs pretty much,
hmm
and not really
Yeah.
considering these. They're only taking what the government is telling them and they're just riding off of that, and of course is what causes them more harm than actual help.
Legit. Yeah, no, and rose-colored glasses is a good word, is a good phrase for it. I mean, if you've read The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson, right, you know how much of the trauma of being bombed by the Luftwaffe and the squalor of the like hastily assembled shelters, like it was not fucking fun down there or clean.
no.
And
Mm-hmm.
all that gets buried in the myth making around, the British public keeping calm and carrying on. But there is, you're right, that genuine there is that genuine sort of eliding of that even among people who lived through it, right? Because in Hilda's estimation, like, okay, well, World War III is coming, we survived World War II, whatever, right? We're fine now.
There's also some segments where James is looking through both pamphlets because he got two different kinds of pamphlets: the Protect and Survive and the governmental leaflet. I don't remember what the other one was called,
Yeah. And
but he
these
starts
are all real
comparing.
pamphlets, by the way, too.
Yeah,
These are
yeah,
all
I
direct
actually
quotes.
did that, and he keeps pointing out that there are some differences in some of them where it says where you have to either hang white sheets on the window or you have to take off half the windows, pretty much just contradictory things so much, but even so, it's like they move on to the next one. They're like, oh, well, we'll just figure it out from there. And they move on to the next item. And that's when you think that he starts to see maybe this is not a good idea. And that it just doesn't occur to him that he's just like, okay, well, we'll just worry about it later.
Right. Um, it's worth noting too, through this entire thing, at least half the time they refer to the enemy, they call them the Germans or the Jerrys,
Mm,
because they're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
we're fighting Germany, right? Like that again, it's their frame of reference is the last war. And The only thing they can grasp for is some sense of purpose. And they have no real conception of why the fuck they would be fighting with the Soviet Union. Because let's be real, why the fuck were we fighting? Like it's because it was dumb. It was like if there had been a nuclear war, it would have been really dumb. Like the closest we ever got to nuclear annihilation was over Cuba. Like Cuba, let them
Hmm.
do what they want to do. And we're still not letting them do what we've done to do. And we're occupying Guantanamo Bay and building a concentration camp there against the wishes of the Cuban people and our own people. But that's a different conversation. Um,
Hmm.
the but a tangential one, right? Because we live in a time where like any war that pops off, there's not like this sense of like national, oh God, we gotta band together to do X, Y, and Z. Like at the most, they could maybe stoke up some like racism for whatever country they want us to fight. But like even then, it's like but we are also at a place technologically in the 80s and certainly now where a lot of that can be like automated and abstracted. But you know,
Mm,
it's interesting. But to kind of move it back to the story as they do these preparations, there's just like a lot of very fun like kind of old person squabbling where he's like, well, I got to take the doors off, and she's like, well, you better not scratch the paint. um, and then he's like, they're talking about a preemptive strike, and she's like, preemptive strike, oh, I hate when the communists do that. And then he's like, no, not that kind of strike. Like, it's very like just kind of silly, whatever, old person banter, which like these feel very real, realized old people that like
mhm.
you could like
The,
meet.
the way they, but what I like about the story is the fact that it reminds me of how me and my partner would definitely be. Let's say if I'm like preparing for a nuclear apocalypse, that's definitely how we would be going back and forth with our little banters. So in a way, it
Yep.
does feel very personal.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm I'm
Yeah.
definitely Jim, and my partner is Hilda in this equation, you know.
Yeah.
I'm in this equation, I'm the drawing of the ominous submarine, I think, is me.
Oh, let's talk
Oh
about
Lord,
that.
yeah.
Because
Holy hell.
three times in this story, you have them doing their little banter. This is all pre-nuke. And then once you just see this full page of this just like black and white shaded like nuclear launch. And then the next time, full shaded black and white, like dark warthogs. And then the truck. And not the animal, that would be crazy. That would
30
be
to 50
awesome.
feral
Yeah,
hogs.
Pumbaa's there for some reason.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then another one of nuclear submarines. And it's like, you know, as if the old people talking about prepping for the apocalypse isn't ominous enough. It is transposing this very cutesy, bright, cartoony old people doing their thing with this like much different, darker art style.
And
It's very
Hmm.
especially like the first time that this happens, right? It's as you said, there's a missile,
yeah.
right? Full page, missile, early morning haze. The next page, the missile is gone. It has
Yeah.
been
It doesn't even
launched.
show the launch. It just
Exactly.
shows missile, no missile.
And that's the thing, right? These things happen, and by the time we get wind of it, it's already over. The missile has already been launched. There's no going back. And, you know, what literally it's I mean it blindsides them when they say yeah this thing's going to kick off in 3 days, right? Oh, and what does Jim say like right before the page with the missile? It'll all be over in a flash. It literally is.
Oh
Yeah.
baby. Oh baby boy. What I really like about I don't know if y'all are planning on talking about this later on, but what I really like how in the graphic novel when it shows the bomb getting dropped is how after it drops, like there's like a whole two set of pages that's just pure white, and then as you turn it, you see like the frames that are just like distorted and melted and red, and how like you could pretty much feel the heat from the bomb that is hitting them.
Oh
And
yeah.
I love how he was able to animate that and portray that in his story.
I think it's
Mm.
cool that Raymond Briggs at this point in his career isn't established enough that he is allowed to do this kind of thing. That I feel like graphic novel writers and like artists, oftentimes I've read like accounts like early in their careers, like they're given like a very tight budget and a very tight like you got to do this within, and he's allowed to play a little bit with his pages, and he does. He's very generous with space when he
Hmm.
wants to be. You know, you've got a part where they're talking about the wars of the past once again, right? And they have like a whole page that is just his memory of Bernard Montgomery. Who's just this like soldier from World War II that he remembers
Yeah,
as
Monty.
Monty, who by the way was dead in 1976. Dude had been dead for like 6 years by the time this came out.
Yeah.
Um, and I also love on that same page his misspeaks. You've got him
Yes.
like talking about politics, right? We already talked about commuters. But he's like, they're talking about different stuff, and then you're like, so who's in charge of the Soviet Union? He's like, well, I think it has something to do with this Marx guy, spelled Marks. And the common turn, as in like common, like Common. And then he calls the KGB the BJ key. And then his wife is like, well, I'll just write a letter to this BJ Key fella, you know?
It opens up the BJ door, and then holy shit.
The BJ Key, where?
But no, there's a lot of that throughout the text, though. Like, he's gone a bit hysterical, a condition of surrender as opposed to unconditional surrender, nutrified El Alamo instead of the Battle of El Alamein, right? It's charming, you know. It's a remove from, it's a remove from what's going on. Like they have some grasp of history of the current political situation, but not entirely, you know. But you can still carry on a conversation like with even with the malapropisms, right?
But you see the ideology, right, that they've been kind of given, and he's absorbing it. And it's interesting, right? Because they don't have this hatred for the Russians as individuals, but because he's kind of got this ideology and like he's been told, he's like describing how the war will happen in this one part. And it's like kind of cute because he's running around with his hands out like he's a plane. And he's like, the US Technical
Yeah.
Air Force will come in roaring with their long range bombers. And he's like, and he's saying, terrific.
Terrific
Okay,
they
fellas.
are.
Yeah. And then he says, they'll razor the Rusky defenses to the ground. Then the
Like he's
Marines
like
will
an excited
parachute.
kid.
Say again.
Like he's like an excited kid, like just getting ready for Christmas or something. And I
Right.
love how he says like how he's ready to establish, or not him specifically, but how they will establish one man, one vote, and women too. Those, of course, progressive king he is.
Yeah. And he says, thus the communist threat to the free world would be nutrified and democratic principles would be instilled throughout Russia, whether they like it or not. Uh, which is like, obviously he's making fun of the concept of it. This is the author making fun of the concept of like the stated war aims against the Soviet Union. But it's also like this old guy who like does genuinely buy into this.
Yeah.
Just he doesn't really give a shit about like any of it. This is as much German as like Russian to him. It's
It's
just kind of
background
like
noise for him, yeah.
the enemy that exists out there. He
Yeah.
has no political agency.
Well, and like structurally as well, right? When he talks about like when he's listing all the things that the pamphlets say to accumulate, right, for the disaster, right? When he's listing that, when he's making his like predictions of how the war will go, right? It's these huge speech bubbles with like lines and lines and lines of text taking up most of the panel, right? And it kind of, especially when he's making the list, like first aid kit, safety pins, scissors, splints, aspirins, diarrhea remedy, tweezers, calamine lotion, TCP, war crisis editions, lice, flea powder, on and on and on, right? It kind of runs together, right? And it gives the impression of noise filling up what would otherwise be bleak and depressive and uncomfortable empty space, right? He has to talk because otherwise he's left with the implication of, I mean, he's already like broken down and been like 3 days blimey, right? So like he has to say something, you know? It's that way that Briggs threads suspense into the text and into the background as well that I really like. Like on page 13, right? You see Jim saying, "Yeah, it'll all be over by tea time," right? As opposed to the war being over by Christmas, right? Um, and the wall is different, right? It's the coloring of this we haven't really gone into yet, but like it's kind of crayony, kind of blotchy in a very effective way, right? And the wall is yellowish brown on most of this page, and he casts a shadow on it a couple of panels back from saying "I'll be over by tea time," right? But here he's in front of a white spot on the wall, and the shadow's much darker, right? Refer back to the Hiroshima Museum, right? There's an exhibition called Human Shadow Etched in Stone, right? Which is the exhibit of a shadow burned into stone steps. Google nuclear shadow, right? You'll see like darker spots burned into like structures where people were standing, right?
No.
It's you can't help but think of that when you're reading this.
That that always sticks with me that even happened.
Hmm.
Hmm. What
And
also happens is the nuclear blast. They manage to get in their little shelter designed by as the pamphlets told them to, and it's pretty like clear that it's woefully inadequate. You know, they're in there kind of debating about what to do, and it's like not even full. It's like not they're partially exposed to the outside from the beginning, and you know, just talking about this and
they
that.
definitely made it in a way to where like they don't want the civilians to panic, but you know deep down like there's no way that you could survive a nuclear blast. Like a few doors and bags is not going to protect you enough from the nuclear fallout, or let
Mhm.
alone the fireball even.
And they forget like they even forget to stay in their little fort. I don't think it would have mattered very much because again, they didn't fully seal the thing off. But like they don't even like they were like, I read somewhere 2 days. You know, we're good. Um,
The fact that later on Hilda mentions that they have a cellar, and she says that I wonder if they would have been better off in this if we would have been better off in the cellar. And hearing that is a huge gut punch because
Oh God.
compared to that, at least they would have had a better chance to survive that than they would have in their own shelter just behind a few doors that was still exposed within when the bomb drops.
yeah. Even in this like original moments, though, these like moments where they're underneath there, like there's some like cute stuff, like they're arguing and she's like, "Oh, we must have been right in the center." And he goes off, "We were right in the center. We would have suffered greater casualties," which I thought was funny. There's just two of them. um, um,
And my dude, you would have been like, what's the word? Evaporated? No,
mhm.
vaporized. That's the word.
Or and you have like the part where they're sitting there like they say to pass the time we should get up to recreation. And she's like, "Of course a man would think of that." And he's like, "Not that kind of recreation."
Don't you dare
There
start
is,
simulating.
and it is. I mean, I hate to get realistic, but like I was reading about this like just today. Like apparently, even like our nuclear weapons aren't hot enough to vaporize somebody, right? You would just be like
Oh my
horrifically
God.
burned and then die. It would happen like in the snap of a finger, but you know, it's I mean, it's just incomprehensible, you know. And I mean, they have some idea of it, right? How dangerous it is because when right before the bombs go off when they're hiding, the speech bubbles go crazy, right? The text gets all jagged and whatnot. Um, but yeah, you know, it's a level of destruction that no, you just cannot be prepared for.
Yeah. And over the next few panels, they start to, as time passes, not a lot of time, you start to have this like green coloration on them, which is like obviously them getting sick, but it's them like basically it looks very crayony and it looks almost like a little kid just like marked up their faces with like a little bit of a green crayon. But it's
Well,
very
it's similar to like the
Mhm.
haze from the, you know, missile and the submarine and the
yeah.
planes, right? You know, it's no longer an abstraction. It's here.
Yes, it is literal. And their hair starts to fall out and they start to have little experiences. And, you know, they're putting it down to like, well, that was quite a shock and this, that, and the other. They go outside and they're like, everyone must be having their Sunday dinners because I smell burning meat. It's like, holy shit.
Oh my God. That dog howling in the movie will never leave my brain. That's the worst part.
Mhm. I mean, like, and they realize like all the stuff they kind of count on, like the corner store and the newspapers and stuff is just not coming.
Willis's.
Yeah, none of it's coming, and they're like, well, it's wartime, and yeah, this is just kind of the point where they sort of they deteriorate and fall apart, and they have, you know, they're kind of waiting on government services to arrive this entire time. They're waiting on government services, and they're kind of dreaming of what like a better world could look like. You know, um, you have this one bit where he's like laying there and he's very sick, and he's trying to dream up of some future, and he says, we'll just have to acclimate ourselves to the post-nuclear era. It could be okay, wiping the slate clean, starting afresh, a new world, purged of the old vices, like London after the fire of London. The new Elizabethan age will dawn. Britannia will rise again, with fresh fields and pastures new to conquer. The old empire will live again, rising like a phoenix from the ashes. A phoenix, to be clear, not a phoenix. And I say that because it's like while trying to rely on these structures, all he can do is pull from this like old language of a Britain that is very much not alive even in 1984, right? Or 1982. Much less one that's coming. You know, sun had set on the British Empire at this point, to be clear. Uh, and so like as he's trying to trust the government, he is like reiterating their language, and it feels incredibly hollow coming from this sickly old man who is then saying like a phoenix from the ashes.
I don't think he even believes it in this
No,
moment, you
God,
know.
no. Of
I
course
mean,
not. He's trying to make his wife feel better.
yeah, because there's many points because he's smiling at this point, right? There's many points where he's smiling and saying stuff that otherwise is like very, very bleak, like way back in page 7, right? It's all been worked out by brilliant scientists. He's talking about the sheer mechanized destruction of the world in nuclear fire, right? Same page, right? With modern scientific methods, you just use doors with cushions and books on top, talking about their like shitty lean-to that they build that won't defend them at all. Page 14. Oh, the powers that be are making much better bombs now. Science has leaped forward with giant strides. Again, he's smiling at this point, because you know, he's smiling at these appeals to authority because regardless of how bleak the situation is, right, at least he knows that someone knows what they're talking about, or he thinks he does, because that's not a comfort to them. It doesn't help them in this moment. They are still slowly deteriorating from radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, like who's running the United States in the 1980s and who's running Britain in the 1980s? Not not the people you want in charge.
This is our second graphic novel from Thatcherite Britain.
It is. It is. The first one was V for Vendetta. Okay, we can at least say Margaret Thatcher is definitely dead in this scenario, right?
Oh, everybody's dead, I think.
No, the Soviet Union was
The only
fine.
ones are just James and Hilda.
I would like to propose that the Soviet Union was fine. The Britain just they made an error and they're all good. They're all doing just fine. Uh,
I mean, they do posit that like perhaps the bomb wasn't even a Soviet bomb, right? Maybe it was just an American one that failed and fell on
True.
rural England somehow,
And it
right?
makes no difference to them, does it?
Yeah, we don't know. They don't know. Like, and it doesn't matter.
I kind of like that it's obscure like that.
Hmm.
Well, for sure. I mean, it's a total. I mean, again, back to not knowing why being half of the horror, right? Like it's
Hmm.
you've gotten to this point where you're totally alienated. You as a class of people indeed are totally alienated from these solutions, right? It's being made by people who are completely beyond, completely unaccountable. I mean, reading this in like this day and age with a slowly escalating proxy war with Russia, like it takes on a whole new sort of resonance.
And then
Yeah.
as they like start to fade away and die, like they decide to get in potato sacks. Can
Oh, that's the worst part.
What are y'all's thoughts on this bit?
That scene is a lot more devastating, I feel like, than a lot more people really give it credit for. Because after Hilda sees her hair starting to fall out, I feel like that's the moment where she realizes there's no hope for them. That help is not coming. And her husband is trying his hardest to be like, oh, the powers that be will keep to us in the end. He's trying his hardest to be remain positive and hopeful, mostly for her. But she is aware of the gravity of the situation. She knows that they are going to die. So she was pretty much trying to get him and her to prepare their bodies for burial because there's no way that no one was going to be able to come for them. And she even reminds him, have you got the box with our medical certificates and our birth certificates, just in case maybe someone happens to find their bodies. And I remember in that scene where she's trying to get him to pray so that way they can prepare for when they die. But he's too far gone to even be able to finish the prayer, and she's just quietly begging him no more as they just fade away. And that to me is like a huge gut punch to imagine like these characters that you grow attached to, and even like if you could imagine them as like your own parents or your own grandparents that you care for more than anything, that especially is what hurts the most. I remember like after that I just cried.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that
so did
that
I.
to me was a painful scene. Yeah.
They they
Because like
they they
I
do look like my grandparents. If you're a
Mhm.
friend or a family member in my life who has met grandma and grandpa, you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
I thought to myself, like, what if my nanny and papa were in a situation like this? And that left me horribly devastated. Oh, and can I point out one fun fact about the end of the
Yeah.
movie?
Yeah.
So at the very end of the end credits, you can hear this repeated Morse code, and it's been deciphered that it's Morse code for MAD, which is mutually assured destruction. And that's one of the acronyms that James mentions is mutually assured destruction. but they don't see it as like, human extinction. They're like, I think my father was a part of the mutually assured insurance. Like they don't realize how serious it actually is. Like that's pretty much saying like humanity is done for. There's no hope for humanity anymore.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what they because that's all they have, right? Again, they're totally alienated from this decision-making process, right? It's already
Hmm.
been done like way beyond them. Um, all they can do is I mean, there's a certain tragedy even in dying wrapped up in these potato sacks, right? Just doing something incredibly silly and unhelpful. And it's like, wow, like this state apparatus that has completely failed to prepare us for this situation, you know? I mean, the state apparatus that was so diplomatically inept as to get us into nuclear war in the first place, right, has reduced us to this, you know? And there's talk that they have a few pages back of how people in Japan survived the nuking, right, of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, um, and then went on to die of like radiation poisoning and this, that, the other, right? And what does Hilda say? Yes, I expected they neglected to do the correct thing, right? And there was no correct thing at that time. Nobody had ever been nuked before. And as ghoulish and chauvinistic as it sounds, what are they supposed to think, right? They've been instructed by the British state, responsible for keeping this sort of thing from happening in the first place, to do their best. Good luck, right? I guarantee you there are millions of people, listeners in your country, or in this country here that we're in, whose analysis of a hypothetical nuclear war amounts to this, right? It's an indictment of a state that serves capital and not its people.
I was thinking that it might make sense, Lenore. I know we did it at the top. Do you want to read the last page?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, by this time as well, we've been through like the colors like leached out pretty much. It's a
Yeah.
stark contrast to how colorful and like bright the countryside is early on. And then it just goes back into the like haze of the, missiles and whatnot. Um, that night. Oh, also Hilda's dialogue bubbles are like kind of shaky as opposed to like the solid round of James's, right? To differentiate them, A, but also I think because she's dying. Sorry, there's just so much that jumps out at me.
And there are like
You're all
parts
good.
here where there are pauses that are entire panels where there's no one who's speaking as well.
Yeah, yeah, let's from Shall We Pray, dear, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Shall we pray, dear?
Pray.
Yes.
Crumbs, who too?
Well, God, of course.
Oh, I see. Yes. If you think it would be the correct thing.
Can't do any harm, dear.
Okay, here goes. Dear sir. No, that's wrong. How do you start?
Oh, God.
Help in ages past.
That's it. Keep it up.
Almighty and most merciful Father,
That's good.
dearly beloved, we are gathered, unto thee. I shall fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me all the days of my life. Lay me down in green pastures. I can't remember anymore.
It was nice, dear. I liked the bit about the green pastures.
Oh, yes, into the valley of the shadow of death.
No, no more, love. No more.
Road the 600,
Scene.
Oh
End.
my goodness.
which is, of course,
Sorry, the
directly,
Rockers.
directly from the Charge of the Light Brigade, Alfred Lord Tennyson, because, he's not remembering his scriptures very well, but you have this famous poem about the Charge of the Light Brigade, these guys on this doomed charge.
A doomed charge,
It's
by the way. This is the Battle of Balaclava during the Crimean War, right? And like this charge is made by this light cavalry brigade into a kill zone of like withering artillery fire. And I was looking this up. Literally, it's just an order that was misinterpreted. They
Yeah.
died for nothing. And that's what's striking to me, there is so much irony in the lyrics that they keep coming back to, part of their sort of cultural myth making, around war and about the valor of like dying for something, even if it's ultimately strategically not valuable. earlier on from this, you see Jim singing "Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag and Smile, Smile, Smile." You know, a really optimistic marching song from 1915. Yeah, the guy who wrote the music for that, Felix Powell, shot himself in 1942 while on guard duty, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, by the similar token, right? You know, the Tennyson poem is about the cavalryman's valor in making that charge, but like valor is pointless if there's nobody for it to inspire. And there's nobody. There's been nuclear apocalypse. We're done.
Yeah.
There's actually a theory that when James is also praying that he's showing signs of having dementia, and it's what, like the effects of the radiation poisoning, it's what's pretty much progressing it. So that's why he can't remember a whole lot of this. Because
Yeah.
there's also like shown that he is knowledgeable in radiation sickness, but he's so old that he can't exactly remember how serious it actually is.
Hmm.
Yeah. No doubt.
Mm.
And that's where it concludes, and it has this dark last few pages, and that's it. And it's not leaving you off with, something hopeful because, of course,
It definitely doesn't hold your hand through it.
right. Well, there's not hope if this happens, right? That's the point, right? Like the point is that this can't happen, right? The whole thing is like it's not like where do we go from here? It's a like I'm not sure we can go anywhere from here. So let's not fucking do it. Because again,
Mhm.
and that was quite relevant then. And of course, by a combination of luck and work and all kinds of different things. This didn't happen in the 1980s. We did not have the nuclear apocalypse. It sure looked like we would, and then we didn't. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And very thankful for it. And part of that is
Mhm.
people who are very, very like this, who worked very hard to get the message out that we cannot have this, to make this unpopular. Of course,
And acted in the moment, Vasily Arkhipov.
yes. And then, but it's worth noting, of course, the idea of the bomb was so alive in the mindset of people in this period. And it is a thing that remains as relevant and real as ever, but it is actually not in the mindset, the American like mindset, the same way it was in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. If you talk to people now, it's just not really the top of people's heads that there could be a nuclear war. But there's nuclear states. There's a lot of nuclear states out there. A lot that we have picked fights with. There are a lot of bombs out there in countries that we have attempted and sometimes successfully destabilized. It's worth noting the Soviet Union would be broken up as an effort of the United States and Britain. And like there were a lot of bombs that went unaccounted for after that. There was not a whole lot of thought, and they didn't put a whole lot of thought into that because they just were so like the government in this story, so reckless and focused on destroying their enemies, they didn't think, hey, maybe we should like count these. Now most of that's accounted for now and all that. I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just making the point. And as we now in 2025, what I'll say is, if you're an American, for sure, I can't speak for every country. The powers that be and the commuters running things, don't trust them. I think we can all say pretty comfortably that we don't. But like in case for some reason you got to this point in the podcast and you're like, yeah, this Elon guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. I think
Jesus
if you're
fucking
listening to
Christ.
Socialist Shelf, you probably know better. But like, let's be very clear. They don't care if you die in a potato sack if it makes them one more dollar. They don't. They just fucking don't.
I remember one thing that was instrumental in like
Hmm.
getting me out to my first PSL event, My first PSL event, I may have mentioned this on the podcast and I may not have, was No War in Ukraine,
Yep.
down in Little Five in March 2022, right? And I remember seeing, not only that there was an organization calling for peace and for negotiation, but before that, just in terms of how the situation was, I believe it was CNN that ran a poll that ran the results of a poll that showed something like 70+% of those surveyed supported the establishment of a no-fly zone in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Less than 30%, I think the number was, actually supported an American intervention in the war between Ukraine and Russia. But it's like, well, wait a minute. Those amount to the same thing, right? If we establish a no-fly zone, it means we're shooting down Russian planes. And that means we're involved in the war, and who knows where that could escalate to. Now we have, long range missiles that can strike deep into the heart of Russia, And that's the thing, right? That's that disconnect between these terms, that might be mispronounced or capitalized in everyday speech, as with James and Hilda. The disconnect between that and what they actually mean is where it's not a result of neglect, it's a result of deliberate misleading
Yeah, because
by
like
our ruling
clearly,
class.
clearly that 40% was like, yeah, I think it would be good if people stopped flying over Ukraine, not realizing they
Hmm.
were asking, do you think it's good if we start shooting down planes?
Right.
And that's how this thing works, right? It's also, we were able to establish a no-fly zone over Libya, right? In the early 2010s, leading to the complete dismemberment of that country, leading from a country that had the highest standard of living in Africa, it now has open air slave markets because of that no-fly zone. And no-fly zone, that doesn't sound so bad, right? We still live with this shit, right? I understand that's not on the level of nuclear apocalypse, but the people in Libya lived through an apocalypse because of that. They did, straight up. The people in, because of a mass refusal for any kind of negotiation, because of a constant, unstoppable demand to push east, east, east for NATO and Western corporations, we now have a fucking war in Ukraine that's killed who fucking knows how many people. And of course, uh, you know, corruption and horrible stuff on the other side as well. We now have this situation in Ukraine. Who knows what comes next? And they want to throw out all kinds of terms and all kinds of whatever and obfuscate the fact that it's this. And we cannot be, not hating on our characters here, but we can't be these characters. We can't be these people. We have to have agency. We have to take power in our own lives. We have to educate ourselves. We have to know that these powers do not care about us. And when we have to say, okay, where do we go from here? So obviously, there's nothing encouraging about nuclear apocalypse, but there is something encouraging about how we can stop it. And it is if the James and Hillos of the world get educated and get organized and don't work with their shitty governments who want to start war and instead create movements of their own to stop the wars from ever happening in the first place.
100%.
A little darker than the
Absolutely.
Sonic episode, Tay.
I know, right? Like, can you believe like how quickly I was able to switch it up on y'all?
You are a guest of extremes and a guest of, again, considerable talent. You are, of course, the artist behind our podcast art, but Tay, what else you got cooking lately?
Well, I'm writing a short story that is based around a family who is taking a trip to the Walt Disney World, and literally on their first day, they are hit with a nuclear strike. And I don't know if Jake told you about that, but and of course, I'm not going to be making any money from this, so Disney, please do not sue me.
Huh.
But I feel like if I write a story based on this, I feel like it would leave such a big impact to see how serious that this could actually be. Because at the end of the day, I'm very much against nuclear weapons. I hate war. I hate the idea of it. And I feel like if it's shown from the eyes of a child who is having, like, being forced to survive, seeing his favorite characters like suffering as a result of nuclear fallout and him having to suffer the results of it, just how much of an impact it can leave on somebody for them to realize how bad and serious it actually is.
And I will say, might want to keep an eye, listeners, on your new favorite publication, The Shelf, because it might just be showing up on there at some point when it is done. We have discussed that, so that would be pretty cool. But yeah, Tay, is there any you maybe make cut it to make more sense? But you have like a YouTube, right? What's your YouTube?
Yes, I have a YouTube account. It's Foxy Macchiato. At the moment, I'm just uploading just regular speed paints and just of any art that I get commissioned or just showing off my little guys, which is just my OCs because I'm a sucker for OCs, man. They're my babies that I love to torment.
Absolutely.
Here's my You should do an OC in When the Wind Blows. Uh When the Wind Blow OC, it's like their
I
dog or
absolutely
something.
should.
Just make it sadder.
Yeah.
They had like a dog.
Oh no, like after the listen, after that one scene with the dog howling and Hilda's like, I expect he's hungry. Like, no, ma'am, he's dying from radiation sickness. And that scene hurts every fucking time. Like, I just want to help that puppy. That's another thing most nuclear movies don't point out is how the animals are going to be affected. Because if my animals are having to suffer, I'm going to raise hell.
Hmm. Um, I will make a note that my OC is 300 years in the future. Hilda comes back as a ghoul, much like Walton Goggins from Fallout, and she has
Oh my
reckoning.
God.
She's hunting down the leadership of the United States and Britain, who are like in vaults. That's my story that I'm writing. That
I should just
I'm sure our the author, I'm sure Raymond would love that. That doesn't ruin
I
his story at all.
Did you see the
maybe I should just redraw James and Hilda wearing the Fallout outfits.
Crawl out through the fallout, baby.
that would be one hell of a fic, right? They learn survival techniques, they set out into the irradiated wasteland of Britain, and they just survive that way.
Fucking James with like a gun,
Yeah.
like, where's Margaret Thatcher?
Did y'all see the Book of Eli?
Yeah, I know Book of Eli.
Yeah,
Uh,
you
my partner has mentioned it.
there's a lovely old couple in the Book of Eli, and I won't spoil how that whole sequence goes, but it's one of the best in the movie.
I might actually check that out.
Just living their best life in post-nuclear where are they, the Mojave Desert, something like that.
Something like that. Well, folks, I appreciate you listening to another episode. Lenore, what are we reading for next week?
Uh, that's the subject of some debate, isn't it?
Yeah, you can make the call. Just tell the listeners, and then it'll be like put in stone.
I posited earlier that we should do something a little bit lighter after the subject matter of this week. Um, I know you had the idea of getting to Parable of the Talents, to which there is, in which there's plenty of positivity, you tell me.
And also like a serious amount of like violence and sexual assault. So maybe if you want something lighter, we should skip a week before that one.
I'm perfectly willing to do that week after next, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
There is a book,
But brutal.
listeners, called Black Chamber. It is by the alternate history author S.M. Sterling. It is a spy story set during the First World War in an alternate history where Taft died on the campaign trail. Teddy Roosevelt won the election and went to a third term. And yeah, it's a spy story set in that backdrop. It's got a very Reddit view of history, but it's a good like swashbuckling sort of vibe.
So it's basically like if you play as like America in Civilization, it's that because Teddy Roosevelt's like God Emperor when you do that, right?
Pretty much, pretty much. There's also Civ 7 has Benjamin Franklin and Harriet Tubman as the American leaders.
Okay. Harriet Tubman is an interesting choice. She never wielded state power, but I'm willing to give her a go.
Yeah, no, like they've made a really good creative decision, I think. They've decoupled leaders from civs, so now you can mix them up, and they've expanded beyond just like heads of state, right? So you have, I think, Ada Lovelace is going to be in the game too.
Okay, interesting.
Cool.
Well, folks, thank you for listening. And I don't have a bit for the end. Fuck.
Don't do what I did. I don't remember the website. I'm not
Oh,
going to look
damn.
it up, but don't do what I did earlier today and go check out there's a tool where like you can pick a spot on the world map and just like simulate a nuke going off there. Don't do what I did and out of curiosity just like nuke your home city. Like
Uh,
even if you're outside of the blast zone, like, you don't know which way the wind is going to blow. It's just going to make your anxiety worse.
Not me, because I'll be
so no, what the fuck are you doing?
My,
Oh my goodness.
my head goes like places that my sanity never would.
not me, because as y'all might
Okay.
remember, listeners have accused me of being on Vladimir Putin's paycheck before, so I've worked out a deal with him. He's not going to send any nukes our way. Georgia, you're safe.
Yes. Oh, look forward to our guest next week.
Oh my goodness.
Vladdy P on the pod. No, God. Everyone have a good week.
Peace out.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.